Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate Day 258, November the 21st, 2017, Tuesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wow, what a busy news day, a couple of bombshells. It seems like almost every day now. It's like during the summer it was like drip, 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 little things, but we're literally getting bombshells, cloud bursts, every day. Holy smoke. Well, let's go ahead and get started. First, I got to do some catching up on things I didn't get to in the last 2 days because there's been so much going down. Okay, so as you know, a lot of you know, I've been trying to get everything I can, information excerpts from this book by the Guardian journalist Luke Harding, who has a new book coming out where he's trying to sell the dossier story and sell Christopher Stevens as being the guy who's telling the truth, and or Christopher Steele, rather. Christopher Steele, the British spy who put together the dossier, allegedly. So Luke Harding from The Guardian has got this book coming out that's supposed to try to sell the dossier as being true, even though we've debunked pretty much most of it, if not all of it. But there's a lot of very interesting things that he's dropping in his book that are filling in some of the blank spaces. Some of the pieces of the puzzle are being filled in, and that's primarily what I'm focusing on, not so much the larger narrative that he's selling, because obviously I've debunked most of everything that he's saying. But there are some very interesting little tidbits of facts that he's dropping in there that are filling in some blanks. For instance, we learned a couple of days ago that it was someone from the Clinton campaign that actually emailed him with the PP-Gate story about Trump having something going on there in Moscow with Russian prostitutes and this and that and the other thing. So we know now that that didn't even come from Christopher Steele. That came from someone in the Clinton campaign who emailed Luke Harding directly at The Guardian on that story. That's in his book. But there's some other details, and these particular things that I'm going to focus on here for the next few minutes have to do with the relationship between Christopher Steele and the FBI and how that all came about. Also, a couple bits of information that back up something that we learned back in the summer of 2016 in the Vanity Fair article, where they talked about the fact that FBI agents in Rome, Italy were meeting with individuals getting information about Trump-Russia collusion. We now know who that was, thanks to Mr. Harding and his book. And we're learning a little bit more in detail about the various meetings, when they were taking place and how that all came about back in the summer. So let's go ahead and focus in on that just a little bit right now. First of all, the relationship between Christopher Steele and the FBI. Now, as a member of British intelligence, head of British intelligence, he already had, associations with various intelligence officials from the United States, the CIA, FBI intelligence, things like that, just from his job he had as being the head of the Moscow division for the UK. But this has to do with some things in more recent history. And it turns out Christopher Steele was one of the investigators who was working on the FIFA investigation, which of course was this investigation into corruption in the World Soccer League. So it appears that when Christopher Steele was working on that investigation, that he had met on a couple of occasions with FBI officials in Rome, Italy. And that's where he first developed this relationship with these FBI agents in Rome. So that's where that all started, is back when Christopher Steele was doing this work for the FIFA investigation. That's where he kind of developed this relationship with the FBI in Rome. So we find out last summer in the Vanity Fair article where they talked about the fact that Comey had been receiving these memos and this information about possible Trump-Russia collusion from his agents in Rome, Italy. But they didn't disclose who these agents were getting that information from. But as it turns out, that person they were getting that information from was Christopher Steele. So it appears that Christopher Steele flew to Rome and he briefed his FBI contact in June. And apparently this was the same guy who he had a relationship with when he was working on the FIFA investigation. Then he returns in September, 4 months later, to Rome and meets again with the FBI official in Rome, and he gives him a full briefing, including not just the man who he originally briefed from the FBI, but the second time he went back in September, they had brought an entire team of FBI investigators so that Christopher Steele could give this team of investigators from the FBI this information that he was getting about Trump, Russia, and all that. So anyway, that tells us identifies from the Vanity Fair piece who this person was that these FBI officials were meeting with. It was Christopher Steele, and he did so on 2 occasions, in June and in September. And whatever he told them in June was mouth-watering enough that when he came back in September, he found a whole committee of FBI fellows there ready to get some more of his false information. So after he briefs these investigators, weeks go by, and then eventually the FBI comes back to him, Steele, and the FBI tells Steele not to go public with the material involving the presidential candidate. And then at that point, Christopher Steele tells this journalist from the Guardian, Luke Harding, that his FBI contacts went silent altogether. That's interesting. So he flies to meet them, to meet this FBI official in June to brief them on Trump-Russia allegations. Apparently an FBI official he met when he was doing the FIFA investigations. Then he comes back in September and finds a whole group of FBI officials who want to hear more about this. He briefs them, and then shortly after that, he is contacted by the FBI, Christopher Steele, and is told not to go public with material involving a presidential candidate. And then, of course, Christopher Steele tells this journalist that after that, the FBI just went dark on him. They went silent. Now, we know also from the Vanity Fair piece, they talk about the fact that Christopher Steele had gotten extremely, extremely frustrated because he had not seen a lot of this information he had been feeding the FBI popping up in the news. It was his intention to brief these FBI officials on this information in the hopes that it would be leaked to the media, which of course eventually did happen. But initially it was not happening fast enough for Christopher Steele. So that is why when Glenn Simpson contacted him and said, hey, you know, I'm trying to peddle this stuff to everyone I can and no one's buying. They don't believe the story. What we need is for you, Mr. Steele, to come over to the United States, and I can set up some meetings and some luncheons and some coffee houses and things like that with some of these journalists from the Washington Post, the New York Times, various other news sites, Yahoo News, things like that, so that they can meet you personally, so that you can build some confidence in them as to what you're saying is true, and then maybe then they'll run these stories, which never, of course, happened. Not until BuzzFeed released the story on January the 10th. So this is very interesting information and fills in a couple of these gaps because we were, of course, trying to figure out who was meeting with these FBI officials in Rome, Italy. And, of course, it was Christopher Steele. So the more, again, that we put this in perspective and look at it again, it appears that what you had was, it's almost this idea where you had just a relatively small group of people. Christopher Steele, Fusion GPS, a couple of the journalists that they were working with, the guy over there at Mother Jones, who were screaming, you know, as loud as they could to the top of their lungs about this stuff, but no one was running with it. This was frustrating them a great deal. So it wasn't like there was a whole lot of different sources out there pushing the dossier, like this thing was spread all over the place. It was actually just a very small group of people, but they were making a hell of a lot of noise. Trying to make a hell of a lot of noise anyway. But this explains the frustration and explains why Christopher Steele acted as he did because of what we learned right here. Probably the point where he probably went off, flew off the handle, and thought, the heck with it, I'm just going to try to push this thing as hard as I can myself, was obviously when he was contacted by the FBI and told, hey, don't go public with this stuff, just let it go, we'll deal with it, just let this stuff go, thanks for the info or whatever. So apparently that upset Christopher Steele, and that's probably what prompted him to come to the States and start sitting down and meeting with these journalists and telling them, giving them the information that would later find its way into the dossier, part of these memos. So that explains how that all came together, and it fills in some missing pieces of the puzzle, assuming that what we're hearing from Luke Harding is true, and at this point we can assume that is true, because it does fit into the puzzle. It explains a couple of things. It explains how Christopher Steele, it explains, first of all, who was briefing the FBI in Rome, Italy. It explains why Christopher Steele would choose Rome, Italy, because he had previous relationship with the FBI director there from the FIFA investigation that he was working on. The timing is all explained. The June trip and the September trip are pretty much coincide with the way events were playing out, with the interaction that was going on between Glenn Simpson and the media, him trying to push the story all throughout the summer. They weren't buying. Finally, we get to this point where Christopher Steele is told by the FBI, not to say anything. Then they go silent. That fits in perfectly with the timing of when Christopher Steele comes over and starts giving personal briefings to the liberal media outlets who still wouldn't run with the story. Because they probably said, okay, it sounds great, Chris, but we need two sources who we can confirm with. And he probably said, oh, well, I can't give you the sources. See, so that's probably how that all went down. Very interesting, and the book is not out yet. It's supposed to come out next week, I think. But there's been quite a few excerpts from the book that have been released, and bits and pieces every day. So I'll keep checking every day, and we'll find out what more we can learn. I expect there'll be more pieces of the puzzle filled in once we get the book, and we can actually look at some of the things that are in the book. And, some of it may be true, some of it may not be true. You never know with these types of things. But we'll certainly take a look at everything that's there and see how it fits in to the overall puzzle. These particular pieces fit perfectly into the puzzle and explain a few things that we didn't know or hadn't confirmed. So, there we go. There was a comment in the comment section, I think it was either Johnny or Robert, was commenting on these latest revelations from this FBI informant that we're hearing, that he's got audio tapes of Russians discussing how they're going to use the Clinton Foundation to work the bribery deal to get the deal done for the gaining control of U.S. Uranium One. We then learn the following day that he's also got videotape of the briefcases full of money that are on their way out the door that will eventually find their way into Bill Clinton's pocket and into the Clinton Foundation. And I can't remember the exact comment in the comment section, but generally speaking, it was either Robert. I think it was Robert, actually. I think it was Robert. Maybe Jeeves. It's one of those three. They were making the comment that how in the world is Mueller, Rosenstein, McCabe, and all these guys going to handle this? I mean, here you have Robert Mueller. He's Uncle Bob running this investigation, Trump, Russia, whatever. He's got this going. You got McCabe, who's under 2 investigations. You got Rosenstein, who appointed Mueller, who's up to his eyeballs in this Uranium One scandal. So you have all these people who are involved in this Uranium One scandal. And here we are, we're getting ready to have this FBI informant come in and drop all these major bombs which implicate every single one of these characters, including Hillary Clinton, including the former Attorney General, Loretta Lynch, and Eric, Holder. Also, on this particular Uranium One issue, Obama is the top of the heap here. I mean, this goes above, Uranium One goes above the Rotten Reverend Clinton. It goes above the Attorney Generals. It goes above the FBI. Their complicity in the FBI is by the fact that they allowed this transaction to go through when they had this information and they didn't bring it to the attention of members of Congress who have legitimate oversight and legal oversight, authority, and responsibility. This should have been brought to the attention of the Congress before this was ever done. But obviously they put the kibosh on that, and the only person who could really have done that would have been Obama. Obama has managed to stay largely on the peripheral on all this stuff, but he is going to get sucked into this Uranium One. Obama will be sucked into this Uranium One thing. You can bet on that. But I agree with Robert or Jeeves or whoever it was that made that comment, and I think they put it in the comment was in a question of how in the world are they going to explain this? How in the world are they going to deal with this when all this information comes out? And I hear that this man is going to be testifying, William Campbell, this FBI informant. Some people are saying this week. I heard next week, but some people are saying this week. So who knows? But in the very near future, this FBI informant is going to drop these bombshells. And my comment back to whoever made those comments was, I don't know. I don't know how in the world you can justify, if you're Robert Mueller, the previous attorney generals, of which there were two, and really Comey was involved in this too, because it began with Mueller, but Comey came in as this was playing out as well. So Comey's involved in this as well. And how exactly do you explain this if you're Mueller or Comey, heads of the FBI? How do you explain this if you're the rotten Reverend Crooked Hillary Clinton? How do you explain this if you're Loretta Lynch? And especially, how do you explain this if you're Barack Obama? You knew that for 10 years this operation was going on, and you had a guy in there since 2000 and, 2009 is when he actually, this FBI informant actually began to work for the FBI undercover. So he's collecting this information for all these years, watching this progression, what took essentially 8 years to happen, for all these things that the Russian government was doing to get control of 10% of our uranium supply and to get control of Uranium One. It took quite a few different steps to get that done, and a lot of things had to be done, many of them illegal. And every bit of it was known by the Obama administration and all the senior department officials, which would have been Clinton and Rice and Powers and Holder and Lynch and Comey and Mueller. They all knew. Rosenstein, McCabe, they all knew about this entire plan that was being played out. And they allowed the Russians to achieve that goal. Then they covered it up and didn't share it with the Congress, and then gave the Russians exactly what they wanted. How do you explain that? I don't know that the best lawyer on the planet could get you out of that one. I really don't know how. The only thing I can think that they can do is try to minimize it by claiming that it's no big deal. Yeah, 10% of our uranium is no big deal. We got plenty of uranium, blah, 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 blah. I mean, that's the only thing they can do is try to downplay the effect of this transfer of ownership of 20% of our uranium into the Uranium One company, which is now owned by the Russians. So, yeah, I don't know how you get out of that one, to be honest with you. That's going to be tricky, and we're all going to have a good time watching them try to spin their way out of that. That is going to be quite entertaining. I can assure you that we'll all be watching very closely and covering it day by day as it plays out here on TowerGate. We will certainly be all over that. Okay. Fasten your seatbelts, friends. The buzzards are circling over the Clintons. The buzzards. What the buzzards do, they fly over a herd of animals and look for the sick, weakly animal that looks like he may soon be passing on, shall we say? And they fly around and circle overhead and wait for that weakest one of the herd to fall behind till he finally falls over, keels over, and then they swoop down and start feeding upon his dying carcass. That is the position the Clintons find themselves in right now. The buzzards are circling. And you just thought it couldn't get any worse for the Clintons? Well, guess what? Guess what? I'm about to use a foul word. So if you have a 10-year-old watching the video, turn it off now. Because we're talking about the Clintons. That can come up from time to time. It appears that there are 4 brand new sexual assault lawsuits being filed against Slick Willie Clinton right now, and his attorney has been advised of this. Apparently, this is not from things that happened 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. This is recent history. It appears that Slick Willie was on a plane, which he apparently traveled with this guy often, and he's a billionaire named Ron Burkle. I don't know who Ron Burkle is, but he's a billionaire, and he's a friend of Slick Willie. And apparently, he has his own airplane, which is nicknamed Air Fuck One. I kid you not, Air Fuck One. And it appears that Bill Clinton took quite a few trips with Mr. Burkle and his private aircraft, Air Fuck One. And apparently, on most of these flights, there were many young women. In fact, 3 of these women, of the 4, were under 21. One of them was 19. 2 of them were 19. One was 20. Very young girls. This is recent history. And apparently, Slick Willie attempted to sexually assault them or did some form of sexual misconduct against them. We haven't actually seen the filing of the lawsuit yet, but it's being drawn up right now. Each of these women have their own separate attorneys. So this is not a class action deal. These are 4 separate women with 4 separate attorneys who have notified Bill Clinton that he is about to have 4 new lawsuits for sexual allegations filed against him. This is brand new stuff. This is not old stuff. Wow. 4 women with 4 separate attorneys right now in the works are filing lawsuits against Clinton, and he has been notified of that. So, we have the rotten reverend, the sociopath, her husband, the rapist, and the buzzards are circling overhead. Oh, and we've got something for the rotten reverend too, don't we? Yes, we do. The bombshell of the day coming up here in just a moment. But first, let's touch on something else. It's something we don't talk too much about. I don't do a lot of foreign policy on here unless it's something that's, really in the front of the headlines. But, of course, we know we just had the elections in Germany just a couple of months ago. Merkel did not do too well. Her Christian Democratic Party did not do too well. And now it appears that they could not even form a governing coalition for their government. So I think that they're going to give it one more shot, but it looks like it's going to fail. And if they cannot, they will have to hold snap elections. We now have 2 more cities in Germany refusing to go along with Merkel's immigration program, which is, of course, run by the technocrats at the EU. So things are finally starting to crumble around Merkel in Germany. The German people have fed up. They've had enough. And I told you I lived in Germany for just about 3 years, and I got to know in southern Germany, a lot of very, very nice people, smart people, but the Germans are very passive people. Very, very passive. But they are also the type of people who, if you push them, when they hit their limit, they will finally put their foot down. And I think that this is what we're seeing. Their country is being destroyed. That was a beautiful country. Absolutely beautiful country, great people. And you look at the state of that country in the last 7-8 years since these EU immigration policies has just been destroyed. And the people there are fed up. And so Merkel is in deep trouble. Her party is in deep trouble. The government cannot form a governing coalition, which means they can't govern. Therefore, they will have to hold snap elections. And Merkel's future is uncertain. So we'll keep watching these events as they play out in Germany, because this is hugely important. Germany is the epicenter, the heart and soul the life support system of the EU New World Order program. I mean, they are the heart and soul in Germany. If the program is rolled back or fails in Germany, that is it for the EU project. And then the dominoes will fall. Once Germany falls, once the German people say, that's it, we're not going to put up with this anymore, all the rest of these European countries are going to follow suit. And the entire globalist project is kaput. Which is good news. Put a big smile on your face, a twinkle in your eye, and some love in your heart, because things are going our way. I keep telling you, we're winning. We are winning. Do not forget that. Judge Roy Moore is now back to a 15-point poll lead. 15-point lead. He's going to win. Take that to the bank. Bet money on it. Yes, indeed. Charlie Rose has now been fired from both of his jobs, now that he is up to 8 accusers of sexual harassment, including apparently walking around naked. Okay. And of course, we have Al Frankengroper. He has picked up another endorsement from a sexually harassed woman, now saying that he harassed her. So it's just amazing. I saw Maura's list of sexual harassers, Democrats, most of them. What an amazing time to be alive. Talk about the boomerang effect. The political correctness that just went way, way, way too far is now opened up the floodgates. And I mean, it's amazing the amount of people that are being taken down, particularly in the liberal media. Look at these liberal media icons, these Hollywood icons. And believe me, there's an awful lot of nervous politicians in Washington, D.C. Very many nervous politicians in Washington, D.C. They know this tidal wave is just building. There's much more to come. When this thing finally shakes itself out, maybe a year or two from now, we could be seeing hundreds and hundreds of some of the most high-profile politicians, actors, musicians, you name it. Just all these high-profile people who run in elite circles, hundreds and hundreds of them could be taken down. I mean, we even had Mika Brzezinski this morning going after the rotten Reverend Clinton. Mika Brzezinski saying to Hillary, look, Hillary, shut up. Until your husband comes out and apologizes for all the things he did, and you need to stop making excuses for him, you need to shut up. That's coming from Mika Brzezinski. I'm telling you, the buzzards are circling over the Clintons. The walls are crumbling around them. And things are going to get quite interesting. Let's just put it that way. But the most important and groundbreaking story, bombshell, that happened today was Peter Sweitzer, who now, for those of you who don't know, Peter Sweitzer has been with Breitbart now. He's a senior editor at Breitbart. So he came on, I think it was a radio program today, and he says that he has talked with individuals from the head of the Kazakhstan Atomic Energy Agency who told him that the rotten Reverend Clinton extorted them. Not just him, but several people on that committee for Kazakhstan's Atomic Energy Agency. And this person is stating that the rotten Reverend Clinton advised them that she would not meet with those officials in Kazakhstan unless they granted the uranium concessions to Mr. Gustra. Then Mr. Gustra took, once he gained control of this Kazakhstan mining corporation, then he moved about $100 million into the Clinton Foundation. So this is Hillary going to the Kazakhstan Atomic Energy Agency, telling the officials there, I will not meet with you until you give Mr. Gustra what he wants. And what he wants is ownership of your uranium company, majority ownership. Once you do that and make a contribution, I'll talk to you. Now, Peter Sweitzer knows that. He's interviewed these individuals. We can assume this FBI informant knows this as well. If in addition to the other two facts that we learned, that he's got tape recordings of Russian officials talking about how to use the Clinton Foundation to bribe them to get what they want, he's got videotape of the actual briefcases full of money that are on their way to Bill Clinton's wallet and the Clinton Foundation. And now on top of that, we have, if we can get actual officials, and I assume Mr. Sweitzer knows how to contact these individuals, which means it won't be long before members of Congress will be contacting Mr. Sweitzer to find out how to get their contact information. There'll be people wanting to interview these individuals. And if they can get even one of these Kazakhstan Atomic Energy Agency officials to corroborate that story, my friends, the buzzards will go into dive bomb mode. That's right. The buzzards which are circling will go into dive bomb mode on the Clintons. Their rotten carcasses will be exposed. The Clintons are going down, my friends. The only question is, how do they do it? Because as my good friend Sergei explained to you, they already have a plan. They knew that they were going to be going down. And their plan is setting American cities ablaze, having blood in the streets. That's how they plan on getting away with this. To have a coup, to stage a coup, and to cover it with a mass insurrection. This is well known by Trump, Sessions, and people I'm sure close to Trump. How you do it, how you take these people down, that's going to be the trick. But if this turns out to be true, if they can actually get one of these individuals to testify under oath in Congress or to a grand jury, man, oh man, oh man, that will be curtains for the Clintons. Just absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow, Wednesday, for the next TowerGate. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys have a good night. Be safe. Bye.